the muzzle of his gun pressed against my temple, cold steel biting into my skin. His eyes, dark, sharp, merciless, were locked on me like I was already dead. "Do you have any idea," he growled, voice low and rough with restrained fury, "what you've done to me?" My chest heaved, my back against the marble wall of the penthouse I thought I'd escape through. The city lights bled in through the glass, 1,000 glittering witnesses to my downfall. But I couldn't look away from him. From the assassin who had been sent to kill me, the man who should have pulled the trigger hours ago. Instead, his hand trembled, jaw clenched, as though the war inside him was fiercer than the one outside these walls. "Then do it," I whispered, tasting blood on my lips. "Finish what you started." For a heartbeat, nothing existed except the silence between us, the static of everything unsaid, and the cruel irony that the man I feared most was the only one who had ever looked at me like this. His finger twitched against the trigger. His breath hitched. And then everything froze. Because this moment, this impossible collision of bullets and betrayal, wasn't where our story began. No, it started long before this night. Before the blood on my dress and the city burning around us, before his name was carved into my bones like a curse. Back then, I was untouchable, or at least I believed I was. My father was a name whispered in smoke-filled back rooms, a man whose empire stretched across borders and oceans, built on secrets and violence. I was his daughter, his most carefully hidden piece on the board, the one he sheltered in gilded cages while he waged wars in the shadows. But being hidden never meant I was safe. In this world, safety was a lie, and I learned at the moment I saw him for the first time. His name was Raphael, though on the streets they called him the Phantom, the deadliest assassin in the underworld. He was the kind of man whose reputation arrived before he did, whose silence carried more weight than another man's threats. And he had been sent for me. I didn't know it then, not the night I first locked eyes with him across a ballroom drenched in crystal light and champagne laughter. I only knew that something in me froze when his gaze swept over me, sharp and clinical, then lingered a beat too long. He looked like the shadow of every story I'd been warned about, tall, lean, wearing black as though it had been stitched into his skin, with eyes that promised ruin. I should have turned away. I should have listened to the instinct screaming inside me that he wasn't just another guest, that danger had arrived wearing a tailored suit. But I didn't. I held his stare a second longer than I should have, like a moth grazing the edge of a flame, not knowing it would devour me. That night was the beginning of everything, the betrayals, the lies, the gun pressed to my temple as my heart betrayed me by beating for the one man who was supposed to end me. The ballroom that night was a theater of masks even though no one wore one, chandeliers dripping in gold light and laughter that meant nothing, men in sharp suits whispering power plays into crystal glasses, women in gowns smiling with painted lips while daggers hid in their words, and me, Lila, standing in the middle of it all like a pawn dressed as a princess. My father had dragged me here to parade me like one of his assets, a reminder to his allies that he still had an heir to protect, even though he rarely let me leave the estate. I remember tugging at the silk of my dress, the weight of the diamonds around my neck suffocating, and how every smile I gave felt like a lie carved into my face. That was when I saw him. Raphael. He stood near the edge of the room as if the chaos belonged to him, not the other way around, a dark figure in a black suit so perfectly cut it looked like it was made from the shadows themselves. He didn't laugh or sip champagne or pretend to play nice. He just watched, sharp and still, his presence so unnerving that people stepped aside without realizing it, as though some invisible force had parted the crowd around him. His eyes caught mine, and in that instant it felt like the air was stolen from my lungs. Not because he was handsome, though he was, in that cruel way men like him always were, but because his gaze was dissecting me, cold and unrelenting, as if he were already calculating the angle of the knife he'd slip between my ribs. I should have turned away, but I didn't. Something about being seen, truly seen in that moment, held me captive. And then he moved, weaving through the crowd like smoke until he stood close enough for me to feel the chill of his presence. "You don't belong here," he said, his voice low, rough, more command than observation. My heart stumbled in my chest but my lips curled into a smile because if there was one thing I had inherited from my father, it was the ability to hide fear beneath arrogance. "Neither do you," I replied, tilting my head. His lips twitched, not quite a smile, not quite a threat. He leaned closer, his breath brushing the shell of my ear. "Be careful what you say, princess. One day it might be the last thing you ever do." And just like that, he was gone, melting back into the crowd, leaving me shaken and angry at myself for letting him affect me. That night should have ended there, but fate has a way of pulling strings you can't see. Over the next weeks, I saw him again and again, in crowded parties, in shadowed corners of restaurants, even once outside the gates of our estate. Always watching, always lingering, never approaching directly. I told myself it was coincidence, but deep down I knew better. I felt the weight of his presence like a storm creeping closer each time, the air thick with something unspoken. I tried to ignore it, to focus on the role my father expected of me, smiling at suitors, pretending to be docile, but every time I caught Raphael's gaze from across a room, my pulse betrayed me. And then the first bullet was fired. It was at another gathering, a celebration for one of my father's allies, the kind of event where deals were made behind curtains while music played loud enough to drown out the truth. I was laughing politely at something I didn't care about when the windows shattered. Gunfire ripped through the room like thunder, screams erupting as people ducked for cover. My father's men rushed to shield me, but in the chaos, I was pulled away, dragged through the smoke and bodies, until I stumbled into the cold night air. That was when I saw him again, Raphael. Only this time, he wasn't a shadow in the distance. He was right in front of me, a gun in his hand, eyes locked on mine. I froze, certain this was it, that he had been sent to finish me off under the cover of blood and chaos. But instead of raising the gun to my chest, he grabbed my wrist and pulled me behind him, shielding me as more bullets tore through the night. "Stay down," he barked, pushing me against a wall, his body a barrier between me and death. I couldn't process it, why the man who threatened me in whispers now risked his life to protect me. The fight was brutal, efficient, a dance of violence that left bodies on the ground and blood in the air, and Raphael moved through it like death personified. When it was over, when the last of the attackers fled into the night, he turned to me, his face unreadable. His gun was still in his hand, and I knew he could have killed me right then, no one would have stopped him, but instead he said something that haunted me long after. "You don't even know why they want you dead, do you?" His words sliced through me deeper than any bullet could. My voice shook when I whispered, "Then why didn't you do it?" For a moment, his jaw tightened, and his finger twitched on the trigger. Then he holstered the gun, stepping back as if distance was the only thing keeping him sane. "Because," he said, his eyes burning with something I didn't understand, "killing you isn't as simple as they think." And before I could ask what he meant, he vanished into the shadows again, leaving me trembling in the aftermath of a massacre. That was the night I realized Raphael wasn't just another assassin. He was a storm, unpredictable and unstoppable, and whether I wanted it or not, I was already standing in the path of his destruction. The days after the attack bled together in a haze of fear and unanswered questions. My father doubled the guards, locked the estate down as though iron gates and armed men could keep the darkness out, but none of it made me feel safe. I couldn't forget the way Raphael's voice had cut through the chaos, how his body had shielded mine, how his eyes had burned when he told me killing me wasn't as simple as they thought. Those words twisted inside me, a riddle I couldn't stop replaying, but I didn't dare ask my father what they meant. He was colder than ever after the attack, dismissing me with sharp words whenever I pressed for answers, his paranoia growing with each passing hour. And then I began to notice shadows that lingered too long. Footsteps behind me when I thought I was alone. A silhouette in the garden at night that vanished when I turned. At first I thought it was my imagination, but then one evening, as I slipped into the library to escape the suffocating silence of my room, I saw him again. Raphael. He was sitting in the corner chair like he owned the place, the lamp casting half his face in golden light and the other in shadow. A book rested on his knee, unopened, his gun lying casually on the table beside him as though this were his home and I was the intruder. My breath caught, my heart stumbling. "How did you get in here?" I whispered, my voice breaking the stillness. His lips curved faintly, not quite a smile, not quite mockery. You'd be surprised what locks don't matter when someone really wants you dead. I froze at the casual way he said it, but his gaze softened a fraction when it met mine. Relax, princess. If I was here to kill you, you wouldn't be asking questions. I should have screamed, should have called for the guards, but instead I stepped closer, drawn to him like I had been the knight of the ballroom. Then why are you here? I demanded, my voice stronger now. His eyes narrowed slightly, studying me as if weighing how much of the truth I deserved. Finally, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice dropping to a low growl. Because the men who came for you that night weren't mine. Someone else wants you gone. And if they succeed, everything your father built will collapse. Including you. His words landed heavy in the pit of my stomach, but instead of fear there was something else rising, anger. Anger that I was being kept in the dark, used as a pawn in a game I didn't understand. So you're protecting me? I asked, incredulous. He laughed once, sharp and humorless. Don't mistake necessity for mercy. But I saw it, in the tightness of his jaw, the way his fingers twitched near the gun he hadn't aimed at me. He hadn't come here to end me. He had come here to watch me, maybe even guard me, though he'd never admit it. I should have been furious, terrified, but instead I found myself stepping closer, close enough to see the scar just beneath his jaw, the way his pulse thudded steady under the skin. Then tell me who sent you, I whispered. His eyes darkened, a storm gathering. You don't want that answer, Lila. Because once you know, you'll never sleep again. My name on his lips made my chest tighten, and before I could press him further, he stood, towering over me, every inch of him danger wrapped in temptation. He slipped the gun back into its holster, leaned down so close I could feel the heat of his breath, and said, "Stay alive, princess. Even if you don't understand why." And then he was gone again, vanishing into the night like a ghost. But his presence lingered long after, the scent of smoke and steel, the echo of my name in his voice, the unspoken promise that the man sent to kill me was the only one keeping me alive. I should have hated him for it, for making me feel this pull towards someone who could end me at any second, but hatred was too simple for what he ignited in me. It was fascination. It was fury. It was the beginning of something I couldn't control. After that night in the library I stopped pretending Raphael was a phantom of my imagination. He was everywhere, always at the edges of my world, a shadow I couldn't shake. Sometimes I would catch a glimpse of him through a window as I walked down the halls, sometimes I'd find the faintest trace of cigarette smoke clinging to the air of my room even though I never saw him enter. It should have driven me mad with fear, but instead I felt a strange, twisted comfort in knowing he was there. I didn't know when I'd see him next, but I knew I would, and the anticipation gnawed at me more than the dread. Days passed and the estate turned into a cage of whispered arguments and locked doors. My father's men doubled, then tripled, but the threat never eased. If anything, it grew heavier, like the calm before a storm that everyone sensed but no one named. I began to notice the way my father avoided my gaze, the way his voice snapped when I asked questions, as if my ignorance was the only thing protecting me. And then, one night, everything broke. I was asleep when glass shattered in my room. I bolted upright, my heart hammering as shadows poured through the broken window. Men dressed in black, faces masked, guns raised. I didn't even have time to scream. The first shot rang out, but it wasn't aimed at me. One of the intruders dropped, blood splattering the carpet, and then Raphael was there, a storm crashing into the room. He moved with terrifying precision, every bullet from his gun finding its mark, every step pushing the attackers back until the room was painted with violence. I pressed against the headboard, trembling, watching death itself unfold inches from me. And then silence. Bodies littered the floor, smoke curled through the broken window, and Raphael stood in the middle of it all, his chest heaving, his eyes burning like fire in the dark. He turned to me, and for a moment I thought this was it, that he'd finally finish what he'd been sent to do. But instead, he holstered his weapon and stalked toward me, grabbing my wrist with a grip that was all steel and urgency. We have to move, he growled, pulling me to my feet. Now. My voice cracked, trembling. Who were they? He shook his head, his jaw tight, his grip never loosening. Not important. What matters is they knew exactly where to find you. This house isn't safe anymore. I tried to pull back, my fear twisting into anger. You think I can just run off with you? Do you even realize what this looks like? His eyes snapped to mine, his face inches from mine, and the fury there made me fall silent. I just saved your life again, Lila. You want to stay here and wait for the next bullet? Or do you trust me long enough to survive? His voice cracked on the word trust, as if it was something foreign on his tongue, but the rawness in it sent a shiver through me. My father's guards burst into the room then, guns raised, but the sight of Raphael standing protectively in front of me made them hesitate. Shouts erupted, accusations flying, but all I could focus on was the steady pressure of his hand on mine. He leaned closer, his voice low enough that only I could hear. They'll blame me for this. They'll think I'm the one who brought them here. You have to choose, princess. Me, or them. My pulse thundered in my ears. He was right. To everyone else he was the enemy, the assassin who had slithered into our lives, but to me he was the only reason I was still breathing. My lips parted, the word caught in my throat, but before I could answer, my father himself stormed into the room, his eyes flashing with something I'd never seen before, fear. He looked at me, then at Raphael, then at the blood soaking into the carpet, and in that moment I realized everything I thought I knew about loyalty, about protection, was about to shatter. Because Raphael was no longer just the man sent to kill me. He was the weapon fate had placed in my hands, and I had to decide whether to use him, or be destroyed by everyone else. The moment my father's eyes landed on Raphael, the air in the room thickened like smoke before a fire. Guards leveled their guns instantly, fingers tense on the triggers, but Raphael didn't flinch. He stood tall, body angled slightly in front of mine, his hand still wrapped around my wrist as if daring anyone to test him. My father's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and cold. Get your hands off my daughter. The words were laced with venom, but beneath them I heard something else, fear, the kind of fear I had never once associated with the man who ruled entire territories like a king. Raphael's jaw tightened, but his voice was steady. If I hadn't been here, she'd be dead. The silence that followed was deafening. My father's men shifted uneasily, glancing between the bodies on the floor and the assassin who stood alive among them. My father's glare slid to me then, demanding an explanation I didn't have. My voice wavered, but I forced it out. He saved me. For a fraction of a second, shock flickered across his face before it hardened again. You don't know who you're talking about, Lila. Raphael's grip on me tightened almost imperceptibly, as if he knew exactly what was coming. My father stepped forward, his tone deadly calm. Do you know what he is? He's not a man. He's a weapon. The Phantom. Do you think he's here because he cares about you? Raphael's eyes never left mine, dark and unyielding, but I saw the faintest flicker in them, something that contradicted every word my father spat. I swallowed hard, my chest tight with the weight of their standoff. Then why hasn't he killed me? The question slipped out before I could stop it, and the room seemed to freeze. My father's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing, but he didn't answer. Raphael finally spoke, his voice low and dangerous. Because killing her isn't my mission. My father's fury cracked then, his mask slipping as his voice rose. Your mission was to infiltrate, to find her weakness, to destroy me through her. The revelation hit like a bullet to the chest. My head spun, the ground tilting beneath me. I turned to Raphael, my heart pounding, searching his face for denial, for anything. But he didn't deny it. His silence screamed louder than any admission. My father's voice thundered again, each word heavy with rage. You were supposed to be her executioner. My body went cold, my wrist still locked in Raphael's hand. I should have ripped it away, should have screamed, but something in me refused to believe that was all there was. The memory of his body shielding mine, of his voice whispering my name in the dark, of his eyes burning when he could have ended me. All of it collided with this moment, and none of it made sense. My father raised his hand, signaling his men. "Take him." The guards moved forward, guns shifting, but Raphael yanked me closer, his voice a growl meant only for me. "If they take me, you won't last the night. Choose, Lila." The world collapsed into chaos then, guards shouting, my father's orders snapping through the air, and Raphael pulling me toward the shattered window where the night beckoned like a promise and a threat. I didn't know what terrified me more, the idea of staying and trusting my father, or the idea of leaping into the dark with the man who had been sent to end me. My pulse hammered in my throat as Raphael's hand gripped mine tighter, as if he already knew the choice I was going to make. And the worst part? So did I. The glass crunched under our feet as Raphael dragged me toward the open window, the night air whipping against my face like a slap. Behind us shouts erupted, my father ordering his men to fire, guards scrambling to obey, but Raphael moved faster than their hesitation. He pulled me against him, his arm wrapping around my waist, and then we were falling. For a single heart-stopping moment I thought he had decided to end it here, to let the world swallow us whole, but the impact never came the way I expected. We crashed hard onto the roof of a lower wing of the estate, Raphael twisting his body so I landed against him instead of the stone. Pain shot through me, but his grip never loosened. Shots rang out above, bullets sparking against the roof tiles, but Raphael hauled me to my feet before I could catch my breath. "Run," he ordered, his voice like iron, and my legs obeyed before my mind could protest. We sprinted across the roof, down a service ladder, through the gardens thick with shadows, every step pounding with the knowledge that I had just betrayed my father for the man sent to kill me. When we finally reached the outer wall, Raphael stopped, pressing me against the cold stone as headlights swept the grounds. His face was inches from mine, sharp and unreadable, his breath hot and uneven. "Do you understand what you've done?" he growled, his tone caught between fury and desperation. "You can't go back. You're his daughter, but after tonight you're his enemy." My chest heaved, the weight of his words crushing me, but beneath the fear something else burned, a reckless spark that had been growing since the first night I met him. "Then take me with you," I whispered, my voice trembling but certain. His eyes widened, just slightly, before narrowing again as if searching for a lie. "You don't know what you're asking." I lifted my chin, ignoring the way my pulse betrayed me. "I know enough. I know you could have killed me a dozen times and you didn't. I know you saved me when no one else did. And I know whatever this is, it's bigger than me. So either you leave me here to die, or you take me with you and we figure it out." For a long moment he said nothing, his jaw tight, his eyes storming with a war I couldn't see. Then headlights swept closer, voices shouting, and he cursed under his breath. His hand grabbed mine again, rough and unyielding, and he pulled me into the shadows of the forest beyond the wall. We ran until the shouts faded, until only the pounding of our footsteps and the ragged sound of our breaths filled the night. When we finally stopped, miles from the estate, Raphael released me, pacing like a caged animal. "You don't understand," he snapped, his voice low and harsh. "I was sent for one reason. To kill you. Everything else, all the times I pulled the trigger and didn't, it doesn't change the truth." My throat tightened, my mind spinning. "Then why didn't you?" His head snapped toward me, his eyes blazing with something fierce and dangerous. "Because you're the only mistake I've ever made." The words cut through the night like a blade, leaving me breathless, my heart crashing against my ribs. I should have been horrified, should have turned and run, but instead I stood rooted, staring at the man who was both my savior and my would-be executioner, realizing that whatever was happening between us was going to destroy everything I thought I knew. His confession lingered in the air like smoke, thick and impossible to ignore. I stared at him, at the assassin who had haunted me, saved me, and now admitted I was the only mistake he had ever made. Something inside me twisted, a dangerous blend of fear and desire, and I hated that my body betrayed me with every racing heartbeat. Raphael ran a hand through his hair, pacing the dirt clearing like a predator trying to keep itself from breaking free. You don't understand what this means, Lila, he said, his voice raw. Every man I've put in the ground, every job I've taken, I never hesitated. Not once. Until you. His eyes cut back to me, dark and wild. And now they'll come for both of us. My pulse thundered in my ears. Who? Who's behind this? He shook his head. It doesn't matter who. It matters that your father isn't telling you the truth, and the truth is the reason they want you dead. His words sank into me like ice, colder than the night air. My father, the man who raised me in a cage of diamonds and silence, was lying to me. But about what? The thought made my chest ache, but Raphael's presence kept me anchored, even if his nearness threatened to drown me. Then tell me, I demanded, stepping closer, my voice sharper than I felt. Tell me what I'm not supposed to know. His breath caught, his jaw clenching as if the answer itself was poison. For a moment I thought he might actually say it, but then headlights flickered in the distance, engines roaring closer. His hand shot out, gripping my arm, pulling me into the shadows. Not here. Not now. We crouched low as black SUVs tore down the dirt road, men with guns leaning out of windows, scanning the forest with ruthless precision. Raphael's body pressed against mine as he shielded me, his arm wrapped tightly around my shoulders, his scent of gunpowder and smoke filling my lungs. My chest rose and fell against his, and in the suffocating silence between us I realized how close we were, how easy it would be to tilt my head just slightly and feel the heat of his mouth on mine. The thought terrified me more than the men hunting us. The convoy passed, the night swallowed their taillights, and Raphael finally released me, though his hand lingered a moment longer than necessary. We need to keep moving, he muttered, his voice strained. Where are you taking me? I asked. His gaze met mine, steady and unflinching. Somewhere they won't look. Somewhere even your father's reach can't touch. The way he said it sent a shiver down my spine. Hours later we ended up in an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the docks, the smell of saltwater and rust heavy in the air. Raphael swept the place with practiced eyes before deeming it safe enough, then finally allowed me to sit. My legs shook beneath me, exhaustion and adrenaline warring in my veins. He stood guard near the door, his silhouette sharp against the faint glow of the city in the distance. Why me? I whispered, unable to keep the question in any longer. Why am I the one they want dead? His shoulders tensed, and slowly he turned to face me. Because you're not just your father's daughter. You're his weakness. And in our world, a weakness is the most dangerous thing to be. My breath caught, my body trembling as the truth settled in. I wasn't just a pawn. I was the blade aimed at the heart of everything my father built, and Raphael, the man meant to strike it, was the only reason I was still alive. And even though I should have hated him for it, I couldn't stop the way my heart pulled toward him, reckless and unrelenting, as if destruction was the only ending we were ever meant to have. The warehouse was silent except for the sound of my breathing and the distant hum of ships in the harbor, yet inside me there was a storm. Raphael leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his expression unreadable but his eyes restless, flickering to me again and again as though checking I was still there. I hated how that tiny gesture steadied me, how even now, after learning what he was, I wanted to close the space between us instead of running from him. Hours dragged by until dawn broke, the light spilling through broken windows, and with it came the weight of everything I hadn't said. My father would already know I was gone. His men would scour the city. And somewhere in the shadows, the ones who truly wanted me dead were tightening their noose. Finally I stood, crossing the floor toward Raphael, my voice sharper than I felt. You can't keep me in the dark anymore. If I'm really the weakness they're hunting, then I need to know why. What aren't you telling me? He didn't answer right away. He just stared, his gaze heavy, and for a moment I thought he might ignore me entirely. Then he pushed off the wall and closed the distance in 2 strides, his presence overwhelming, his shadow swallowing mine. You want the truth? His voice was low, harsh, like gravel dragging across my skin. The truth is your father isn't the man you think he is. He built his empire by making enemies no one else would dare touch. He spilled blood, stole fortunes, burned families to the ground. And you, Lila, are the only thing he ever kept alive. You're the thread that ties his empire together. If you fall, so does he. His words made me dizzy, the world tilting under me. I had known my father was ruthless, but hearing it like this, stripped bare by the man sent to end me, was something else entirely. So I'm bait, I whispered, my throat tight. A target so they can watch him crumble. Raphael's jaw clenched. Exactly. My hands shook, anger and fear warring inside me. And what about you? What are you, Raphael? Just another weapon they throw at me until one of them finally succeeds? His eyes burned into mine, and for the first time I saw the crack in his armor, the war beneath his skin. I was supposed to be the last one, he admitted, his voice breaking around the edges. The phantom who never failed. They gave me your name, your face, told me to end you quietly and bring your father to his knees. I've killed more men and women than you could imagine, and I've never hesitated. But the moment I saw you, I knew, I couldn't do it. My chest rose and fell hard, every word slicing into me. Why? I demanded, my voice a tremor. Why me? He stepped closer, so close I could feel the heat radiating off him, his breath brushing my cheek. His eyes searched mine, and for once, the assassin's mask was gone. Because you weren't afraid of me. Because you looked at me like I was more than a weapon. And I hate you for it. The last words came out raw, broken, his face twisted in a fury I knew wasn't directed at me but at himself. My heart thundered, my breath catching, and before I could stop myself I whispered, then hate me all you want, but you're still the only one I trust. His hand shot out, grabbing my chin, forcing me to look at him. His touch was rough, but not cruel, his eyes a storm I couldn't escape. Do you have any idea, he growled, the words low and dangerous, what you do to me? The question ripped through me, every nerve alight, every thought consumed by the nearness of him. And in that moment, with his breath mingling with mine and his voice trembling with a violence that felt too much like longing, I realized we were standing at the edge of the very scene I'd seen before, the gun to my head, the breaking point we were hurtling toward. And I didn't know if I wanted to run from it or fall headfirst into the fire. The words hung between us, heavy and dangerous, as if the very air around us would shatter if either of us moved. His hand on my chin was firm, unyielding, but there was something in the way his thumb hovered just shy of my skin, as though touching me any more gently would undo him completely. My breath caught, my pulse hammering so loudly I swore he could hear it, and every part of me screamed to close the sliver of space between us. But I didn't. Neither of us did. Instead, Raphael's jaw tightened and he tore himself away, pacing the length of the warehouse like a man walking into his own execution. This is a mistake, he muttered, his voice jagged. I should have finished it the first night. Pulled the trigger and walked away before this. His fists clenched, his whole body coiled like a predator barely restrained, and yet I felt no fear. Not of him. Not anymore. And yet you didn't, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. You had me alone in a dozen places and I'm still standing. So don't pretend it's as simple as a mistake. He froze, his back to me, shoulders heaving with a breath he didn't release for a long time. Finally he turned, his eyes wild, darker than I'd ever seen them. Do you think this is some kind of game? Do you have any idea what happens if they find out I couldn't kill you? They'll send another. They'll send 10. And they'll make sure you suffer before the end. And when they're done with you, they'll come for me too. His words should have terrified me, but all I felt was the fire sparking higher inside my chest. Then let them come, I whispered. His eyes narrowed, dangerous, but I held his stare. You think I'm fragile because my father kept me locked in a cage my whole life? Maybe I'm not a killer like you, but I'm not going to keep hiding while everyone else decides whether I live or die. If you can't finish the job, then at least teach me how to survive. He blinked at me, stunned into silence. For the first time I saw uncertainty flicker across his face, as though my defiance had cracked through the walls he'd built higher than any fortress. Slowly, he stepped toward me, his voice low. "You don't know what you're asking." "I know exactly what I'm asking," I shot back, my voice trembling but strong. "If I'm already marked, then I want to learn from the man who scares them all." The silence stretched between us, taut and breathless, until Raphael closed the distance, his face inches from mine. His hand lifted, not to grab me this time, but to brush a strand of hair from my cheek, his touch feather-light, almost reverent. "You're going to ruin me," he whispered, as if the thought both terrified and enthralled him. I swallowed hard, my chest tight with something I couldn't name. "Maybe you already are," I whispered back. And then, as if the tension had finally reached its breaking point, his mouth was on mine. The kiss was nothing gentle, nothing hesitant, it was fire and violence and desperation all at once, his hand tangling in my hair, his other arm crushing me against him as though he could fuse me to his very skin. I responded with equal fury, years of silence and fear burning away in that single, reckless moment. When he finally pulled back, his forehead pressed to mine, his breath ragged, his voice came rough and broken. "This changes everything." My lips trembled, my heart still racing. It already did. And as his eyes locked on mine, I knew we had crossed the point of no return, the assassin and the girl he was meant to kill, bound now by something more dangerous than any bullet, choice. The days that followed blurred into a fevered dream of running, hiding, and stolen moments that burned hotter than any fire I had ever known. Raphael kept us on the move, shifting between safe houses and abandoned buildings across the city, always one step ahead of the men hunting us, but no matter how many shadows we passed through, I could never forget the way his lips had claimed mine in the warehouse. He didn't speak of it afterward, didn't allow himself the luxury of weakness, but it lived in every glance he stole when he thought I wasn't looking, in the way his hand lingered on my back when guiding me through the dark. I wanted to demand more, to shatter his silence with questions and confessions, but I knew better than to push too soon. His heart was a battlefield, and I was both the enemy and the only survivor left standing in it. One night, weeks after we fled the estate, we found ourselves in a penthouse high above the city. It was meant to be a temporary refuge, one last stop before Raphael forced me to disappear entirely, but fate had other plans. The lights of the city bled in through floor-to-ceiling glass, the hum of traffic below a faint reminder of a world we no longer belonged to. I stood near the window, watching the glow of the skyline, while Raphael loaded his gun at the table, his movements sharp, precise, as if every bullet was a prayer he didn't believe in. The silence between us grew unbearable, and finally I turned, my voice breaking through the quiet. "Tell me the truth," I said, my throat tight. "If they told you to kill me now, if they ordered you to finish what you started, would you?" His hand stilled, the bullet in his fingers slipping and clattering onto the wood. Slowly, he looked up, and in his eyes was the storm I had seen the first night we met, rage, longing, despair, all coiled into one. He rose from his chair, the gun still in his hand, and crossed the room until I was trapped against the glass. The muzzle pressed cold against my temple, and I gasped, my pulse racing. His face was inches from mine, his voice low and raw. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" The words echoed, the same ones from the moment I knew would come, the moment that had haunted me since the night in the warehouse. I swallowed hard, my lips trembling, my chest rising and falling against his. "Then do it," I whispered, the words tasting like blood and truth. "Finish what you started." His breath hitched, his finger twitching on the trigger, and for one terrifying, intoxicating second I thought he might actually pull it. But then his hand trembled, the gun slipping as he cursed under his breath and slammed it against the glass instead. He pressed his forehead to mine, his body shaking, his voice ragged. "I can't." Relief and devastation crashed over me all at once, tears burning at the corners of my eyes. "Then stop pretending you're only my enemy," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Stop pretending you don't want me." His grip slid from the gun to my face, rough fingers trembling as they cupped my jaw, and his lips crashed onto mine again, fiercer than before, desperate and unrestrained. This time there was no denying what we had become. Assassin and target. Enemies. Lovers. And as his arms pulled me tight against him, I knew that no matter what came next, no matter how many enemies hunted us or how much blood would spill, the war we were fighting was no longer about survival. It was about us. And for the first time, I was ready to burn the whole world down if it meant he would never let me go.